Welcome to my library, dear guest. My name is Ko, and I will be your storyteller. Lean back and relax as I read to you today's story, titled Forever, the M of Over a Decade tells a collection of tales about the only player they've ever banned from their table. By the author, International Sun 445. This video will cover the first 3 parts of said story, with the last 3 parts being covered in another video. With that all being said, on to the story. Part 1. Okay, so I don't ever use Reddit. I'm posting only because, having been a fan of the subreddit for a while, I had to get this out of my system. I'm a long-time D&D fan. In fact, I've been a forever DM for over a decade now, and I love it. I put a lot of work into my games and trying to deliver an engaging and satisfying narrative to my players, and as a result, we have great campaigns and fun sessions. As a general rule, everyone knows what the table's expectations are beforehand. Granted, our group has played together for years, and knows what type of games I tend to run. And generally, the games run smoothly, keeping a decent clip and shying away from obvious game-halting behavior. But every rule has its exception. Since my very first game, one guy has been a reoccurring face in our group, and is the topic of this post. We will just call him CC. CC has a knack for disrupting games and then swearing it's just what his character would do. Back then, though, I was naive to the that guy stereotype, and came in full of excitement with my first ever character for my first ever game. The party had played a couple of sessions before I joined, but my Warforge was quickly established with the group, and we pressed on to save the world from total destruction. Fast forward through some narrative, and we get to our first full party encounter. Our party, my Warforged Barbarian, a human wizard, a halfling bard, half-elf fighter, all great guys, readied our weapons and rolled initiative. CC, playing an elf druid, opted to ready a firehawk summon should anything move adjacent to him. I thought nothing of it, being new and all. DM at the time breaks down to me how combat works, and I take my first turn, charging in with a rage activate and taking a swing at some living skeletons that were firing at us. The wizard went next, shooting off a spell and dealing some decent area damage. Then came CC. "I summon my firehawk," he says with glee. "Okay, no problem," DM says. "I'll move here," CC says with a huge smile on his face and moving his token away from the skeletons and into the far back corner of the large room we were all in. "Okay," says DM. "And your firehawk?" "It joins me," CC says, moving the hawk adjacent to him. The round moves around and we take some decent damage from one of the skeletons exploding. CC comes up in the turn order. "Okay, CC," says DM. "Do you take any actions?" "I'm going to sit down and play with my firehawk," CC says under a smirk and a chuckle. I stayed silent, unsure what druids were all about and not wanting to step on CC's toes. But the wizard, an experienced player, says, "What the fuck, dude, go hit them." "My druid is a pacifist," argues back CC. This was new info to us all, as CC had never mentioned this before. "Well, heal then," wizard says. "That's what the bard is for," CC fires back. There was a moment of quiet before the DM moved on to the next player, but each round went on in much the same fashion, CC choosing every action to sit and play with his firehawk, and the party asking him to help us out. We were all reaching that point in game where our combat options were getting scarce and our HP low, but CC insisted on sitting still. And I wish I could say it got better, but CC's druid would avoid any sort of actual interaction. Every single encounter. If he wasn't playing around with his firehawk, he was eating rations, or playing an instrument, or doing some weird impromptu cheer thing to keep us inspired. The campaign eventually ended, our party barely stopping the BBEG, and after the game ended, DM wanted a break to play a PC. I was the only one showing interest in taking over to run a game, so that's exactly what I did. CC was a great friend of the DM, and everyone else besides knew him outside the game. He and the DM had played together for a while, and having been an established part of the group, I had no issues with him rolling up a character to join us, not realizing what was to come from our future games. And this, dear reader, is where my tales of CC truly begin to take off. Now that you understand the beginnings of my experience with CC, I can really dive into the near decade of horror stories that came after, and hopefully help you understand why CC is the only player to this day I've barred from my games. End of part 1. Now, on to part 2. Continuing on from the previous post, our first campaign was finished. I was working on my first ever run as our DM. I was definitely that DM that way over-prepared for the game, having maps and calendars, holidays, moon charts. I really dumped a lot of my focus into this game. And I was excited to get it going, having just seen our party finish a complete adventure successfully. I was running Forgotten Realms-inspired homebrew, had plans to take the party all the way through the 9 hells. And it started out super well. We had a drow fighter, a human rogue, a tiefling warlock, and CC's neutral evil half-orc barbarian. The party was largely using their wits to navigate what was looking like an evil PC adventure, but wasn't taking a murder hobo route to succeed, and it was a breath of fresh air for me coming off the back of our big heroic world-saving campaign we had just finished a few weeks prior. The party had ended up inside the second tier of the 9 hells, equipped with a ladder of passage from Asmodeus, and were seeking the Duke of the plane of hell they were currently on so they could proceed further. Nothing too crazy, I had time enough for crazy stuff. I just wanted to get them down into the tougher levels first. However, when the party finally made it to the Duke's tower in the middle of the plain, he made a hiccup in the way of bad persuasion attempt that they themselves had prompted. The Duke demanded to see the right of travel, but the party didn't trust him with it and wouldn't hand it over. It was looking tense. However, I'm a very narrative-focused DM, and I wouldn't be so rash as to kill a party over a failed persuasion roll. The Duke would inevitably relent, not wanting to cross Asmodeus, but was rightfully annoyed at the intruders into his domain and wanted to air that grievance. CC was having none of it. "If he's not gonna let us in, I'm going to go into a raging charge," CC proclaims. "Just hold on, man, we need to try and talk him down," replies the warlock. "Nah, man, my guy's impatient. He's not used to waiting on people telling him to do things, so he's just gonna go get it." Let me reiterate at this point, I'm not typically a PC killer. I know how attached players can be to a character, and I don't like to just rob them of that experience without a very good reason. So I tell CC, "Look, man, out of game, this dude is like a serious deal around this area. Do you need some background info on the 9 hells?" "Nope, I just need this asshole to back off," CC replies with that same smirk starting to come over his face. And that's when I realized that CC wasn't gonna drop this. Well, he stands his ground, demanding you answer why you're here and what Asmodeus would need with your kind, his hand outstretched for your letter. "I smack it away," he says as he scoops up a D20. The party sighed. I sighed. "You're actually smacking his hand, or you meant that out of game?" "Nah, man, I swat that hand out of my space." I couldn't possibly think of a way this didn't result in some serious damage, more than any of the PCs could realistically spare in their predicament. The devil rolled initiative. CC rolled initiative, apparently unaware or uncaring as to what was about to happen. And as everyone saw clearly coming, the Duke smacked CC into next week before demanding the party just go on their way and make sure they didn't intrude upon him any further. CC laughed, yelling, "What the fuck?" as I narrated past him. As soon as there was room for him to chime in, he did. "Dude, that was bullshit," he said with a half-laugh of disbelief. "How the hell did he drop me like that?" I explained how the 9 hells hierarchy worked and that the devil he hit was basically a second in charge under Asmodeus himself. I told him the math to his death, how the attack well exceeded his current HP pool by more than half his negative health value, resulting in death. CC gave it a whatever while he finished in the session, the party a little annoyed they were put in such danger. We got him a new character made up, and I had a talk with him after about my want to really lean into a more serious game, and chalk this up to a misunderstanding. He agreed and took his new character sheet with him. However, his new character didn't hit the table then. He said he wasn't a fan of the hell setting and would join in after they managed to escape, which, to his credit, he did. We welcomed the 4th PC because of how D&D and counterbalancing tends to work out. But this wasn't the last time CC placed his party in harm's way. But that's a story for later. Or right now, rather. End of part 2. Let's go on to part 3. So, from where we last left, as happens, life separated some of our players from the regular group. Graduation, college, jobs, etc. I was hungry to get a game going and was working on another homebrew, inviting anyone I knew that played or might want to play a game, including CC, who had finished our last campaign on a decent foot some years back. The campaign was centered around 9 masks that had to be found by the PCs to prevent an apocalyptic event. It was stated several times that the masks were evil and would seduce its wearers to do horrible things with great power, hence the whole reason they needed to be collected. Now, I'll say ahead of time, ending aside, this was easily one of my favorite campaigns ever. We had a 6-person group full of new players that still play to this day, with huge highs and great impromptu work from everyone involved, especially our Dragonborn Paladin of Bahamut, who made me not hate the trope. Anyways, CC was a human fighter trying to be the best arena fighter in the world, and his character was obnoxiously cocky. He would often instigate fights just to show how strong he was, and if a town didn't have an arena, he would challenge the biggest guy he could find to a fist fight. This never changed, no matter how much he won or lost, until the party found one of the masks. CC impulsively decides to don the mask, prompting a whiz save. He passes, and I tell him that the mask has increased his strength and calm by 1, but decreased his wisdom by 1. He doesn't even acknowledge what I said, going on a monologue about how much stronger he is, and how he can't possibly be defeated now, etc., etc. Now, by design, these masks are a trap for those that wear them. They were never meant for PC use. They got an entire lecture about the dangers and magics of the masks, and no one else in the party ever tried to wear one, which was a smart call, but for CC it was too late. Each week that went by with the mask on increased all its effects by 1, so strength and con would be boosted to 2, and wisdom would drop by 2. The next week it would be 3, the next week 4, etc. CC, either uncaring or never cluing into the dangers of this, welcomed the stat inflation, delighted in his new power. Then, one day, CC failed his wisdom check. I had decided on the powers of the mask well before we started session 1, and as it happened, this mask caused a battle fury when its wearer fails its whiz save. What this meant is that, as the group woke up to eat breakfast, the best arena fighter in the city put on his mask and attacked the nearest creature he could, the mask dominating his mind and driving him temporarily mad. Cece realized what was going on with wide eyes and says to me, "Hey, no, wait, that's bullshit. You can't just make my character do stuff. What about player agency? He wouldn't just do that." I've told him that I know it sucks, but his wisdom was at like 7 at this point, and he failed an honest roll versus the mask's attack. It had weeks to make itself more finely attuned to him, and this was the culmination of all these things. "It's fucking dumb is what it is," Cece replies. "How long am I like this?" "Till the mask comes off, or you are unable to act." The party came up with a plan to get the mask off him before he dropped their cleric and managed to calm him down. But I could tell Cece was annoyed out of game, and honestly I did feel bad making him feel like I jerked control away from him. But I also knew it was my job to adjudicate fairly, and his actions bore consequences. I didn't realize how mad he was, though. That inside, CC was planning his biggest stunt yet, the cantaloupe incident. But I'll save that for a new post. To be continued. And that was today's story. I hope you enjoyed your stay and that I will see you again soon, for there are always more stories to be shared.